Useless, Todd muttered, tossing the book onto the table like it was trash. My chest tightened as I watched him. What is this? He scoffed, gesturing at the handmade scrapbook I'd spent weeks creating. This is the best you could come up with, a pile of pictures and sentimental garbage. You're ridiculous, Lydia. My hands clenched in my lap, but I forced myself to stay calm. I thought you'd appreciate something meaningful. It's a collection of our memories, everything we've been through together. He rolled his eyes. What we've been through. Please, I'm tired of all this emotional crap. You could have gotten me something useful, but instead, you waste time on this nonsense. It's embarrassing. I swallowed the sting of his words. Todd, no. He cut me off, standing up and raking a hand through his hair. You don't get it, do you? This isn't working anymore. We're not working anymore. I need someone who actually adds value to my life, not drags me down with this pathetic attempt to be thoughtful. My stomach twisted. What are you saying? He smirked. I'm leaving. I've met someone, Elsimora. She's 20, exciting, and she actually knows how to have fun, unlike you. His words hit like a punch, but I refused to let him see the impact. And this is how you tell me? I asked, my voice trembling but steady, after I put my heart into this. He laughed, cold and dismissive. Your heart, that's the problem. Lydia, you're all heart and no substance. I deserve more. For the moment, his words echoed in my head. Then, to my own surprise, I started to laugh, not bitter or forced, genuine, loud, cutting through the tension like a blade. Todd frowned. What's so funny? I stood, still laughing, and reached for the scrapbook. You have no idea what you're walking away from, I said, flipping to the back page. His eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? I pulled out the folded deed, tucked inside, and held it up. This, the deed to a vacation house I bought for us. I was going to surprise you tonight, but I guess that's off the table now. His jaw dropped. You bought a vacation house. I smiled sweetly, slipping the deed into my purse. Looks like Mara won't be enjoying that, will she? Todd's smug confidence crumbled. Since when do you make decisions like that? I tilted my head, since I realized that I can't depend on you for anything meaningful. While you were busy chasing a 20-year-old, I was building a future for us. Silly me for thinking we wanted the same things. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, staring at the scrapbook, as if trying to figure out how he'd miscalculated so badly. You're overreacting, he finally muttered. This doesn't change anything. Mara and you? I cut him off. Todd, I don't care. Take your exciting life and get out of mine. I turned and walked toward the bedroom we once shared, the sound of his spluttering excuses following me as I grabbed a small overnight bag. I paused at the dresser, staring at the framed photos or wedding, vacations, moments that once felt full of promise. They were relics now. I'd been clinging to something that no longer existed. When I returned, Todd stood by the door, arms crossed, trying to look composed. You're really just going to leave? He asked. I am. I brushed past him. This is ridiculous, he snapped. You regret this. I paused at the door. Maybe, but at least I won't regret staying in a marriage where I'm nothing but a punchline. With that, I stepped outside. The night air was cool, and as I drove away, the deed tucked safely in my bag, a realization sailed over me. I wasn't just leaving Todd, I was reclaiming myself. I drove straight to Grace's house, only person who'd understand without judgment. She opened the door, took one look at me, and frowned. What did he do this time? Can I come in? I asked, my voice steady but tired. She stepped aside. Kitchen or living room? Kitchen, I said. She was already reaching for the wine. Minutes later, we sat at a small table, a glass of Merlot in front of me. So, she prompted. I took a deep breath and told her everything. By the time I got to the vacation house, her jaw had dropped. He called you useless after everything you've done for him, she fumed, and then had the audacity to tell you he was leaving for some 20-year-old. Are you kidding me? I shook my head. Nope, that's Todd. Always so sure I'd just take it. But you didn't, Grace said. a slow smile breaking through her anger. You walked away, and honestly, good for you. Hearing it out loud, something inside me shifted. I hadn't just walked away from Todd. I'd walked away from years of trying to be someone he could appreciate me and who would never be enough for him. What now? Grace asked. I exhaled. I don't know. I spent so much time trying to make our marriage work. I don't even know who I am outside of it. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Then you figure it out one step at a time. But first, you stay here tonight. No arguing. I smiled. Thanks, Grace. That night, lying on her couch, exhaustion finally caught up to me, but beneath it was something else. Relief. Todd was no longer my problem. For years, I'd bent over backward to make him happy, and now, I didn't have to. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time I was excited to find out. The next morning, I woke up to my phone vibrating on the coffee table. I reached for it, and I was ready for whatever came next. I reached for my phone, squinting at the screen. Missed calls, 6 text messages, no. 14 from Todd. With a sigh, I unlocked it and scrolled through the onslaught. Where did you go? We need to talk. You're being childish. Lydia, you can't just walk away like this. A bitter laugh escaped me. Walk away. That was rich, considering that's exactly what he did last night. Grace wandered in, coffee in hand. Let me guess, Todd. Bingo. I held up the phone. He's spiraling. Well, what did he expect? She set the mug in front of me. You don't get to treat someone like crap and then act surprised when they stop putting up with it. I nodded, sipping the coffee. He's never had to deal with consequences. He's always coasted his arrogance, his selfishness, but not this time. Damn right, Grace said with a satisfied smirk. Later that day, another message came through that made my stomach tighten. I'll come by the house later. We need to sort this out. My house, even now, he still acted like he had a say in my life, like he could come and go as he pleased. I considered replying, telling him to stay the hell away, but then I remembered Grace's words from last night, let him stew in it for a while. So I ignored him. Instead, I spent the day with Grace, helping with errands, rediscovering the parts of my life I'd neglected for years. By the time I pulled into my driveway that evening, Todd's car was already there. He was pacing in the living room when I walked in. His expression a volatile mix of anger and desperation. You finally decided to show up. His voice was sharp. I set my purse down calmly. I live here. What are you doing here? We need to talk. His tone softened. This has gotten out of hand. I folded my arms. What's gotten out of hand? Todd, the fact that I stood up for myself, or that you're realizing Maura isn't the price you thought she was. His jaw tightened. For a second, I thought he might explode, but then, with a weary sigh, he sank onto the couch, running a hand through his hair. Look, I made a mistake. Okay, I wasn't thinking clearly, but we can't fix this. A hollow laugh escaped me. Fix this? Todd, this isn't a broken vase. This is years of you taking me for granted, expecting me to just smile through it. Lydia. No, I cut him off, my voice steady. You made your choice. Now live with it. I grabbed my bag and walked upstairs, leaving him in stunned silence. The next morning, I packed his things, left them by the door, and changed the locks. That evening, when he showed up looking smug, I met him on the porch with a suitcase and a folder. He frowned. What's this? Your stuff, I said, nodding toward the bag, and my lawyer's contact info. You'll be hearing from her soon. His smirk faltered. You're being ridiculous. You can't handle life without me. I smiled faintly. We'll see about that. Now get off my porch. He hesitated, then grabbed his suitcase and stalked off. The next weeks were a breath of fresh air. The house was quieter, cleaner, more mine than it had ever been. I kept busy, throwing myself into work, reconnecting with friends, leaning on Grace. She was thrilled. Good riddance, she said when I told her he was gone. He was LH. Lydia, you're better off without him. I knew she was right, but late at night, in the quiet, doubt sometimes crept in. Had I done the right thing? What if I regretted it? Those thoughts didn't last long, not after Todd called. Lydia, he said, voice tight, we need to talk. I sighed, already exhausted. What do you want, Todd? It's Mara, he said bitterly. She's gone. The corner of my mouth twitched. Oh. She laughed at me. He spat, said I was pathetic, said I threw away the only good thing I had. Couldn't believe I let you keep the house. I smiled outright. The house, that must have done. She said I was an idiot. He continued, ignoring my sarcasm, that I lost everything I worked for, and then she laughed. It was almost too satisfying. The man who dismissed me, belittled me, thought he could replace me with someone better was finally getting what he deserved. And you're telling me this because I made a mistake, he admitted, his voice low. A huge mistake. Can we talk? I shook my head, even though he couldn't see me. No, Todd, we're done. I hung up, let the silence settle around me like a warm blanket. That night, curled up on the couch with a cup of tea, I felt something I hadn't in a long timepiece. The divorce moved faster than I expected. My lawyer helped me lock everything down, making sure I was protected. As I sat in her office reviewing the final papers, she flipped through them and nodded. Todd didn't even contest anything. I think he knows he has no leverage. I smiled, a quiet sense of victory washing over me. I think he finally realized I'm not a pushover he thought I was. I chuckled, shaking my head. I say you've made that very clear, Grace quipped, leaning back with a satisfied grin. As I left the lawyer's office that afternoon, I felt something lift from me in unseen weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying. The paperwork was filed, my finances were secured, and Todd was officially out of my life both on paper and in reality. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. That evening, Grace showed up at my door with a bottle of wine and her usual flair for celebrating victories. To Lydia, she cheered, raising her glass high, the woman who finally kicked Todd to the curb and reclaimed her life. I clinked my glass against hers, grinning, to Grace's friend who never once said, I told you so. Not yet. Anyway, she teased, taking a sip. The night unfolded with laughter and conversation, ranging from my plans for the future to Grace's latest escapades and, of course, Todd's dramatic fall from grace. So, Grace asked, lounging on the couch with a sly smile, do you think he's still crying over Mara? Probably, I said with a smirk, but honestly, he doesn't have much else going for him. No wife, no house, no mistress. I almost feel bad for him. Almost, Grace laughed. When she left, I sat alone in the quiet of my home, reflecting, the old math one who bent over backward to keep Todd happy, who constantly worried about his approval felt like a ghost, the woman I was now, the one who could laugh at his downfall and feel proud of reclaiming her life, was here to stay. Todd had underestimated me, but I hadn't, and for the first time in a long while, I felt exactly where I was meant to be. In the weeks that followed the divorce, my life shifted in ways I never expected. Without Todd's shadow looming over every decision, I rediscovered pieces of myself buried under years of his criticism and selfishness. It wasn't just about rebuilding, it was about thriving. One of my first moves was to visit a vacation house. For so long, it had represented a hopeful promise of a better future that was supposed to be ours. But now it was mine. No strings attached to Todd, no arrogance lingering in the corners. When I pulled up to the property, nestled by a serene lake and surrounded by towering pines, I felt a rush of pride. I made this dream a reality in it for him, not for anyone else, but for me. Inside, the house was everything I had imagined that county, spacious, with large windows framing a picturesque view. I spent the weekend there unpacking, arranging furniture, and savoring the peace of knowing I didn't have to share it with someone who didn't appreciate it to me. Grace visited the next weekend, her energy as infectious as ever. This place is incredible, she said, spinning in circles in the living room. How did you keep it a secret for so long? I don't know, I admitted, laughing. I think I wanted it to be perfect before I shared it with anyone, and honestly, part of me was afraid Todd would ruin it. Well, it's perfect now, she said, plopping down on the couch, and you deserve every bit of it. I smiled, a sense of warmth spreading through me, not from the sunlight pouring through the windows, but from something deeper. I deserved this. As the months passed, I began to fill my life with the things I had set aside for too long. I picked up photography again, spending hours capturing the beauty of the lake and woods around me. I joined a local book club, something Todd had always mocked as a waste of time, and I started traveling, not for work or to meet anyone's expectations, but simply because I wanted to. Each new experience felt like a small rebellion against the old math one, who had lived in Todd's shadow. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. One evening, as I sat on the deck of the vacation house with a glass of wine in hand, I thought about the life I had left behind. There was no anger anymore, no bitterness, just gratitude. Gratitude for the lessons I had learned and the freedom I had gained. Months after the divorce, life had settled into a new rhythm. The vacation house had become my sanctuary, a place where I could either be alone with my thoughts or invite friends over to share in the peace I'd found. Grace visited often, usually with wine and a fresh batch of stories. "You've completely transformed," she said one evening as we sat by the fire pit, overlooking the lake. I raised an eyebrow. "Transform how?" Grace grinned. The old Lydia would have been fussing over everyone else's, worried about cushions and refilling glasses. This Lydia, she gestured at me, curled up in sweatpants with a cozy blanket. She's relaxed, happy, and not giving a damn about what anyone thinks. I laughed and took a sip of my wine. I guess I've realized I can only control my own happiness. Trying to make Todd happy was like pouring water into a bucket with a hole in it. It was never enough. Those lessons didn't just stay at home. I started freelancing, something I had always wanted to do, but never had the courage to try because Todd thought it was too unstable. Now, my schedule was my own, and the freedom was exhilarating. One of my clients' design firm invited me to lead a workshop for their team. The experience sparked a confidence in me I hadn't felt in years. "Why hadn't you started your own business?" the CEO asked after the session. The question lingered in my mind long after the meeting ended. Why hadn't I? A few weeks later, I began laying the groundwork for my own consulting firm. It was terrifying, but for the first time, I wasn't holding myself back out of fear of failure or worse, Todd's disapproval. Grace was there every step of the way, helping me brainstorm a name for the business. "Phoenix Consulting," she said one night, her eyes sparkling, "because you've risen from the ashes, like the badass you are." I rolled my eyes but smiled. Phoenix Consulting it is. As I poured myself into building the business, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Every win, a new client, a glowing review, a successful project was a reminder of how far I'd come. And for each success, there was a quiet moment of gratitude for the strength I'd found, for the friends who had supported me, and for the chance to rebuild my life on my own terms. One evening, as I sat on the deck with my laptop, finalizing plans for a new project, my phone buzzed, a message from Todd. "Can we talk?" I stared at the screen for a moment before deleting it without replying. Some things were better left in the past. 6 months after I walked away, I stood on the deck of the vacation house, watching the sun dip below the horizon, content and free. The lake shimmered with hues of orange and pink, kind of view that once felt like a luxury but now felt like a promise I had made to myself and kept. I had built a life I was proud of. Phoenix Consulting was thriving far beyond what I'd imagined when I first started. The freedom to choose my clients, my hours, and my projects made me feel alive in ways I hadn't in years. Grace arrived that evening, as she often did, carrying a box of pastries from a local bakery. "You know," she said, setting the box down on the table, "I never thought I'd say this, but I think Todd did you a favor." I laughed, pouring us both a glass of wine. "You're not wrong. If he hadn't been such a jerk, I might still be stuck trying to make him happy." She raised her glass with a grin. "To Todd, world's most clueless man, for setting you free." We clinked glasses, laughing, but her words lingered long after she left. I had been so focused on moving forward that I had stopped to reflect on just how much had changed. The timid version of myself constantly seeking Todd's approval felt like a stranger now. This new life wasn't just about escaping a bad marriage. It was about rediscovering who I was, what I wanted, and what made me happy. And for the first time, I felt like I knew the answers. As the stars began to twinkle in the sky, I grabbed a notebook and pen, jotting down ideas for the future new marketing strategy for Phoenix Consulting. A list of places I wanted to visit, goals I hadn't dared to dream of until now. Later, as I closed the notebook and gazed out at the lake, I realized something. I wasn't just free from Todd's expectations, I was free from my own doubts, ones that had kept me small and scared for so long. A month later, I received an email from one of my new clients. The subject line read, "Keynote Opportunity." Curious, I opened it and scanned the message. They wanted me to speak at an upcoming industry conference, highlighting the success of Phoenix Consulting and my journey as an entrepreneur. For a moment, I hesitated. Public speaking had never been my strong suit. Todd had often mocked me for stumbling over my words in casual conversations, let alone something as formal as a keynote speech. But this time, his voice didn't matter. I hit reply and typed, "I'd be honored to participate." Preparing for the keynote became a new focus, and with Grace's encouragement, I poured my energy into crafting a speech that felt authentic. "Don't sugarcoat anything," Grace advised. "Tell your story the way it is, failures, triumphs, all of it. That's what people connect with." And that's exactly what I did. The day of the conference arrived, and as I stood backstage, waiting for my turn to speak, I felt a familiar mix of nerves and excitement. When the host introduced me, I walked onto the stage to polite applause. Taking a deep breath, I began. "My name is Lydia, and a year ago, I never would have imagined standing here. Back then, my life revolved around trying to meet the expectations of someone who didn't believe in me. But today, I'm here because I chose to believe in myself." As I shared the story of how Phoenix Consulting was born from a place of rediscovery, I noticed heads nodding in the audience. People were leaning in, smiling, even jotting down notes. I felt like my voice mattered not just to me, but to others. Afterward, several attendees approached me, eager to share their own stories of struggle and resilience. "You inspired me today," one woman said, her eyes bright with emotion. "Thank you for reminding me it's never too late to start over." Her words stayed with me as I left the conference, feeling more empowered than ever. That evening, as I sat on the deck of the vacation house, I reflected on everything that had led me through the heartbreak, the betrayal, the doubts. It had all been part of the journey. Todd was now a distant memory, his texts and calls long ignored. Mara had been right, was a loser, but I didn't need validation from her, from him, or from anyone else. I had built a life I loved, one step at a time. And it was just getting started. This was my story now. And I was writing every word,